So the first lesson about understanding opinion is figure out whether people have really thought about the issue. Do they really have any opinion yet? The second set of issues have to do with how you frame an issue and how you word a question. And I want to deal with two sets of issues relating broadly to race. The first is affirmative action. This is a chart that shows response to the question, support for affirmative action programs for blacks and women. You show broad, not universal, but broad support, moderate increase in support. But you ask the question a little bit differently. Should we make every effort to improve the position of blacks and minorities, even if it means giving preferential treatment? And you see, actually it starts out a little bit higher, but the numbers go up and down a little bit. It's not as consistent a positive trend. Well, change the wording and you get a different number. Now, another wording, in order to overcome past discrimination, do you favor or oppose affirmative action designed to help blacks, women, and other minorities get better jobs and education? 63% said favor. Same time, same poll, do you oppose programs which give special preference to qualified blacks, women, and other minorities in hiring and education? Seems like the same question. Well, there's some nuances of wording, and 63% becomes 57%. Now, I want to suggest here that the failing in the way things like this are almost always treated is the news reporter will almost always ask, well, which one of these is right? And that's the wrong question, okay? Both of these reflect response to a different stimulus. Look at the words, okay? I want to suggest the word special preference is a little bit of a turnoff. Not huge, but it probably reflects the drop-off here. Perhaps because this is put kind of in positive terms like help. Special preference suggests the idea, well, somebody may gain, but the idea that somebody may lose. I want to give another example. Again, our affirmative action type program, are they a good thing or a bad thing? And this pairing, I think, is really interesting. Are they fair or unfair? Now, I want to suggest two things. One of the things, okay, in each case, good or bad, 60% good, 47% unfair. As an analyst, what really intrigues me is I'm looking at that 13%. It says, this is a good thing, even though it might not be fair. I find that very interesting. The other thing I want you to think about mostly is how the news media would treat these two questions. If you're going back to this first question only, the headline probably is affirmative action favored 2-1. If you are reporting on the second question, you'd say public almost equally divided on the subject. Okay? I want to suggest that either of those characterizations is wrong. And the reason they're wrong is they're trying to reduce a complicated set of attitudes that relate to numerous things down to a single characterization. It's oversimplification. Any one of those is wrong, but in a sense, any one is right, but it simply doesn't tell you the whole picture. And that is the reason, again, you got two things here. One shows 2-1 support, one shows almost even Steven. The media tends to probe that and wants to say, all right, one of these has got to be wrong. I reject the premise. They both shed light on opinions that can be inherently complicated. I want to show another example, the famous beer summit. We've all seen the picture. The question, and I want to show you, Up to this point, you might look at this and say, well, you know, those question wording differences are obvious. You know, one of them had the word special treatment. We know that's a negative, so we expect that to cost some points. I want to show you how even what would appear to be a very neutral, innocuous change can change the distribution of opinions you can get. In the middle of this, well, who's more at fault? NBC poll, Wall Street Journal, 27% Gates, 11% Crowley, 29% said both, a third had no opinion. Same time, Pew, which is a very respected organization, did a poll, and they said, you know, same question, who's at fault, with one difference. They didn't provide both as a stated option. In other words, this question said, who's at fault, Gates, Crowley, or would you say they're both at fault? This one said, who's more to blame, Gates or Crowley? They would accept both, but you had to volunteer it. You weren't given that option. As an analyst, I find this difference, the differences to this, to be very interesting. My interpretation is the following, that you had a group, you note the Gates numbers stay about the same, it's about a quarter. The Crowley number is either 25% or 11%. So I'm interested not in that 11%, but in the 14%. What that says to me, these are people who kind of thought that Crowley was more at fault. I'm sorry. Let me make sure I get this. They kind of thought that Crowley was at fault. If you give them two choices, they say this is the 14%. They thought Crowley's at fault. But if you give them an easy way out, they say, well, you know, Gates wasn't completely blameless either. Okay? Whereas the people who thought Gates was at fault thought he was at fault. Okay? Again, I want to suggest, if you're trying to understand what people believe, neither one of these is inherently superior to the other. If you look at both of them, you have an understanding, and all the other numbers kind of come out the same. I find that 14% really, they thought, again, this is a group, there's 1 in 7 who says, I kind of think Crowley was more at fault, but the other guy wasn't completely blameless either. And if you then broke that out as a separate category, then you'd understand the distribution of opinion on this. As you might expect, there's a racial basis in opinions. Among those willing to give an opinion, this is just the NBC survey because the other survey wasn't big enough to break out. But 30% of blacks thought Crowley was at fault, 32% of white thought Gates was at fault. You could look at this and say, well, race determines everything in terms of these attitudes. I want to suggest that to my mind there's a bigger story. There is the extent to which that's not the case. Because among both blacks and whites, about 2 people out of 3 either said, I've got no opinion, or they're equally so. Yes, the residual was predicted by race, but there was a majority in both cases who said either equal or I'm going to reserve judgment on it. Again, the principle here is that delving deeper into this, looking at the way wording change the answers that you get, looking at how different groups behave, all those kinds of things are going to help you understand the reactions to and it's fair game. If you have a different interpretation, at least you've got more facts here to go on.